Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. In today's episode, we're doing our updated projection of the opening day roster. And with some injuries, there are going to have to be some changes.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me for some of my other work in the sports talk space. I've been over on air at 97.5 The Fanatic, doing sports talk radio here in Philadelphia for 5 years. I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for 3 seasons. And this is now my fourth year as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure you're rating and reviewing. If you're listening to us in podcast form, if you're checking us out on the YouTube, go to Locked On Phillies YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button. It's free and it's easy, and it'll get you notifications when new episodes are posted. It's also a great way to help us out and say thank you for the content here on Locked On Phillies. So I appreciate everyone who's done that and everyone who's going to do that. We're going to lead off today's episode with our update on the opening day roster projection. Things are starting to become less clear, which is kind of making things more clear in a roundabout way. I'll explain what I mean there. We've also got our Mailbag Monday responses, even though it's Tuesday. I was coming back from vacation yesterday down in Clearwater, or rather the Tampa area, so I didn't get a chance to get the questions out, but we got some for today. And also, we're going to round out by talking about a strong spring so far from Johan Rojas and what it could mean for his chances with the Phillies this year. But let's jump into the opening day roster projection, and it's going to change slightly once again due to injuries once again. So JT Realmuto, Rafael Marchand, they're the catchers. That's not changing. Last week, we had to make an alteration because Weston Wilson's injury. I did not account for that in the first one, but I had Cody Clemens in there as a position player to make up for that. So the infielders, I had Harper, Stott, Turner, Bohm, Sosa, and Clemens. Now, I don't see that changing. I don't. I think that's going to be pretty set in stone that those will be the guys on the team. I haven't heard anything about any other guys making a push. The only other name that I'm starting to hear more about is Gabriel Rincones Jr. I don't think because he's a lefty bat, he's going to be able to make the team coming out of camp. I do think we'll see him at the major league level at some point this year in a depth role once injuries start to happen, like they happen to everybody. I mean, we're going to talk about them in a couple spots with this opening day projection, but I don't see anything changing there. Harper, Stott, Turner, Bohm, Sosa, Clemens are going to be your infielders. The outfielders, Kepler, Marsh, Rojas, Castellanos, Schwarber. Right? That doesn't seem to have much wiggle room. The only other way that you're going to potentially do this is if you believe Edmundo Sosa is a good enough backup for a couple of infield positions and you think you can shift guys around for other infield positions, and then you might want to carry an extra outfielder. And in that case, could that be Rincones? I guess so. I don't know why you'd add another lefty to an outfield that already has Kepler and Marsh, and Schwarber is another depth piece. 2 righties, 4 lefties. Doesn't feel like the right balance. I think that'll probably be a righty batter if they end up going with that, but I don't see that as more likely than Cody Clemens being kept on this team. So the position players are all staying the same for the time being. Now, things could change as we get even further into camp, but that seems to make the most sense for what the Philadelphia Phillies are trying to do. Watched Cody Clemens with a nice bomb the other day in spring training when I was down there, taking on the Pirates on the road in Bradenton. Yeah, I mean, I like the guy as a depth piece. I do. So not changing much with the position players, but the pitchers, the bullpen is going to have to change a little bit. Starting rotation still set. Wheeler, Nola, Sanchez, Suarez, Luzardo. That's all good to go. But now we know that not only do you have the open spot that you initially had open because the 8th spot in the bullpen was unsure and still is unsure, but now you may have a 7th spot. I'm going to do this operating under the assumption that Matt Strahm will not be ready for opening day. The Phillies are unsure yet. He could be ready to go. This doesn't seem to be a major injury. Now, it could be something that pops up again later in the year, but they're going to want to be cautious with the guy, and I'm going to want to be cautious with my projection. So with that in mind, I'm going to, for the time being, give that spot to somebody else. If Matt Strahm is not able to make the opening day roster, who could that guy be? And there's something that it may be Phillies fans' worst nightmares right now to hear about this, but the 8th spot may have to change as well. I was mentioning Michael Mercado a lot as a guy that was up with the team last year, Had a couple opportunities. Is a versatile guy that could start, could relieve, could be in the bullpen, could be depth option for the rotation early on in the season if you need so, after Joe Ross, after Andrew Painter, who's going to come up probably in July. But let's look at the names real quick that we definitively have. Orion Kirkring, Jose Ruiz, Jose Alvarado, Jordan Romano, Joe Ross, Tanner Banks. Those guys are all locks. The question marks from last week's were Matt Strahm and Michael Mercado, because Michael Mercado is kind of just a shot in the dark by me to try and predict who's going to get that final spot. Now Matt Strahm is hurt, so we'll see if he's able to make the opening day roster out of camp based on that. He'll be up as soon as he's ready. Like, he'll be good to go as soon as he's cleared. Like, they're not going to put him in the minors this year or anything like that. So I'm just saying, like, if he's on the injured list to start the season, they'll have another roster spot to fill. Could they potentially? Now, here's a big brain move. Could they potentially leave the bullpen at 7 guys and add another depth piece to the position player group to add a little bit more there and survive the first part of the season, like a month, not a month stretch, but like a week stretch or so without Matt Strahm? They could certainly do that, but it feels weird to make those roster moves that quick and go back and forth with guys not at the same position. The more we get into spring training, the more it sounds like Taijuan Walker has a legitimate shot to make this team. I know. I'll give you a second to collect yourself after hearing that. But, yeah, it does seem like a major possibility that this dude's actually going to be in the bullpen for the Philadelphia Phillies in 2025. Now, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know what you could possibly hope to get out of him. But here's what I will say. The Phillies aren't going to cut him. They're not. They're not just going to wipe their hands and say, we're going to eat all this money for you not to play for us. It doesn't seem like anyone's interested in trading for him right now. Now, that could always change. But not yet have we heard any whispers of, like, this team wants Taijuan Walker, which I can't necessarily blame any team for not coveting Taijuan Walker after the year that he had last year. But if he's still on this team, it seems like the consensus is he will be in the bullpen on the major league squad. And now with Matt Strahm questionable, you have 2 spots open. I'm moving, against my better judgment, against the Phillies' better judgment, Taijuan Walker into the opening day roster projection in the bullpen. So he's going to take one of those spots. But now you need another one. And Taijuan Walker is a guy that is a starter-reliever combo, I guess. He's never really relieved like that, and he wasn't great at it last year in the little time that he did spend doing it in the regular season. But he hasn't been much of a starter for the Philadelphia Phillies either, and he gives you more than Michael Mercado when it comes to experience. And then that means you have 2 guys in the bullpen who could possibly start in emergency situations if needed, and Joe Ross and Taijuan Walker. I don't think you need 3. So that reduces some of the argument for Michael Mercado being on the team. There's 2 names that have popped up that could be potential final spots in the bullpen. Now, both are righties, which is worrisome. Right now, if the season started today, you'd have 2 healthy lefty relievers. It would be Jose Alvarado. It would be Tanner Banks. And Tanner Banks is just a lefty specialist pretty much. So we'll see how that plays out. Pays out is what Taijuan Walker's contract is doing right now. But we'll see how that plays out. The 2 names that I've kind of been hearing are Alan Rangel, who is a career minor league guy, bounced around to a bunch of different teams up and down the system and everything like that. I don't know that he's ready. He's close. He's on the 40-man roster, so that makes it easy to go ahead and make that move. You wouldn't have to add or subtract anybody from the 40-man, so that makes him a certain candidate. But he doesn't have major league experience. And then there's Devin Sweet, who does have major league experience, about 7 innings worth, to be exact, I believe, when I checked his baseball reference page. Another righty, but he's a guy that's had a solid spring that the Phillies may look at and say, okay, is it time for him to come up to the major league squad to start the season? Major league experience gives you the advantage, even if it is 7 innings, because that means some team at some point took a chance on calling you up, liked your stuff enough to say this guy's a major league arm. And even though he hasn't had a substantial amount of time in Major League Baseball, anyone you could look at with that level of experience is an interesting name. Another name that you should be aware of is Nick Vespi, who is a guy that was with the Orioles for a while, and he got called up and sent down like 16 times or something. Like, the dude has been up and down, crazy, more than like people on a trampoline. But that's showing you that he's one of those, quad A players is a weird thing for pitchers because pitchers have such different roles sometimes when they go from the minors to the majors. He's a guy that the Orioles felt comfortable enough giving a lot of opportunities and spots Maybe the Phillies feel the same. We'll see how that all works out. But he was acquired this offseason. I forget if he was a signing or a trade. I believe he might have been a signing. But he's another arm to maybe keep an eye on. I'm going to give it to the guy with the most major league experience, or the clearest major league experience, which I would say is Devin Sweet. I think that's going to be the guy that gets that final spot. As of right now, it could change. Again, relievers are so tricky. I'm taking a shot in the dark with this. But you hear what I'm saying about the bullpen? And we talked about it yesterday if you want my initial reaction to the Matt Strahm injury news. I don't feel great about where this bullpen is starting off the season at. I know they have guys with major upside, but they also have guys with major question marks. And compared to last year's unit, this one is not great. And last year's unit collapsed, imploded in the postseason. Some of those were from all-star guys. So you can't just say, okay, well, they collapsed. This one isn't as good. This bullpen is going to let this team down. It doesn't just work like that. Not every year is the same. But it's definitely a concerning part of it. So my opening day roster version 3.0, once again, is we're going with JT Realmuto, Rafael Marchand, Harper, Stott, Turner, Bohm, Sosa, Cody Clemens, Kepler, Marsh, Rojas, Castellanos, Schwarber, Wheeler, Nola, Sanchez, Suarez, Luzardo. That's your rotation. And the bullpen reads Kirkering, Ruiz, Alvarado, Romano, Ross, Banks, Taijuan Walker, against my better judgment once again, and Devin Sweet. Those are the names that I'm feeling out right now. And we will see how much that changes between now and next Tuesday, because as you've noticed, a week is a long time for a lot of stuff to change when it comes to Philadelphia Phillies baseball. So there you have it. If you agree, disagree, whatever your thoughts are on my opening day roster predictions, go ahead and let me know in the comments of this episode what you think. But I think it's a pretty solid set of reasonings for why I'm putting it that way. Coming up next, we're going to answer some of your questions about what you want to know with the Philadelphia Phillies. Mailbag Monday on a Tuesday is going to be an interesting one with some of the questions that we got. We'll talk about that in a second here on Locked On Phillies. But first, let me tell you about our friends over at Supply House. I mean, you got to get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, they can help you out. Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need, delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Well, Supply House offers expert support, industry-leading service, so you always talk to a real person. They're the best. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. So join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's S as in supply, H as in house, 5. So SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. All right, let's go ahead and dive a little bit into our Mailbag Monday questions. So we got a couple of tweets that I want to run through when it comes to what you want to know about the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, we'll lead off with Ed Holinsky's question here on Twitter or X. And this is kind of what we were just going through. He asks, based on the spring training performances, who might steal an opening day roster spot? A guy I talked about yesterday is in a very interesting position. Gabriel Rincones Jr., I don't think he's got a way to the major league roster, and there's very few spots to be like, oh, this guy could steal a spot. The bullpen would probably be the easiest, but there are so many options to potentially flesh out. I don't really know how that's going to work. A lot of pitchers on minor league deals that could get elevated. But Gabriel Rincones Jr., he's still up in camp. So if he continues to be there and continues to hit, continues to gain a little bit of trust from the major league players on this roster, maybe he finds himself in as a depth piece. We talked about, hey, if the bullpen is low on guys, do they bring in two guys that aren't really worth putting on the roster? Or do they maybe use an extra roster spot for a position player? Could that be Gabriel Rincones to get him up, to get him a little bit of major league experience at the start of the year? I don't know. That would be my pick, though, for a guy to keep an eye on. As far as stealing an opening day roster spot, Taijuan Walker would probably be stealing it if he was to get one, but I think the injuries in the bullpen have opened that up significantly. With a mention of Taijuan Walker, we'll move on to the next question. With Taijuan Walker's improved pitching, do the Phillies trade him or do what with him? With Strahm's injury, does he have a place in the bullpen? We were just kind of talking about that. I don't know if I'd say Taijuan Walker's improved pitching, right? It's spring training. Again, you can't put too much stock into that as far as that's concerned. But what I will say is Taijuan Walker, the trade thing is becoming less likely by the day. And if you put him on your major league roster, I mean, once teams get into the regular season, they're going to be in a situation where they don't look to make acquisitions that early. Like, no one's going to trade for Taijuan Walker in the first week of the season, right? They're going to go with the team that got him there. And then if they have major injuries, well, then they'll cross that bridge when they come to it. Now, New York, the Mets, and the Yankees have both had trouble health-wise with their starting rotation already. We already talked about in yesterday's episode, Garrett Cole heading for Tommy John surgery. His year is done. Do the Yankees maybe look at adding to the rotation? The Mets, do they need a depth piece of the rotation if they don't trust the health? He is a former Met, Taijuan Walker. So maybe he could be moved. But I don't see it happening right now. I haven't heard enough rumor. I haven't seen enough about it being reported. I think we're just looking at a situation where the Phillies are stuck with an asset that they're paying too much to, and they're going to have to deal with the repercussions of that by putting him on the roster once again. So we'll see how that all plays out and what goes on with that. But I don't know how you can look at Taijuan Walker and project trade. I don't know how you can look at Taijuan Walker's contract and project the Phillies eating it. It seems that more and more likely we're getting him pushed into a spot where he could make the opening day roster and be part of this team. Now, I don't know what that does to him mentally, like going from starter to reliever, being a guy like, for all intents and purposes, he's a good teammate. I know that he had that issue with the tweets following the 2023 postseason when he didn't make a start after winning 15 games in the regular season, and he was upset about that. And guess what? To be honest with you, I'm on Taijuan Walker's side with the way he looked at it individually. I don't think he should have thrown, but I think he should feel like he should have thrown, right? Get me with this, all right? I don't think he was going to help the Philadelphia Phillies enough in that spot. And that was very, very clear in 2024 that the talent level has been lacking based on the contract since he's been here. But if I went out and I had 15 wins in a regular season for a major league team, if I had been a major league pitcher for a while, I was a starter on a team, they went through a whole postseason run that culminated in an NLCS loss, choke job to a team you should have beaten in the Arizona Diamondbacks, and I didn't touch the ball, I'd feel some type of way too. But I don't think that makes him a bad teammate. I think that makes him a competitor, and him and Rob Thompson worked through that very quickly after those tweets came out. And I think he's a good locker room guy. I do think the guys like having him around. Not that you should get a roster spot because guys like having you around. That's kind of the Garrett Stubbs rule that a lot of fans have not been happy about. And he's at least a more likable character in Philadelphia Phillies lore over the past couple of years than Taijuan Walker, who had a really, really rough year last year for the team and has underperformed his contract. But my point is, if Taijuan Walker's on the roster, it's not the end of the world. It would be very annoying, and it would further exacerbate the thoughts of that contract was terrible by Dave Dombrowski when he signed him. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't kill the Philadelphia Phillies' chance to compete. He's not their fifth starter. That's Jesus Luzardo. It doesn't change their offense. They're still going to have to figure that out and how to go about the approach. But Taijuan Walker being in the bullpen to start the year, it would feel bad. It wouldn't be in practice as bad as it would look visually, right? So you may just have to stomach that one as fans for the time being until everybody gets healthy in the bullpen or you find a better option. One clear thing that you can totally tell, right? The Philadelphia Phillies at the trade deadline, if they're anywhere remotely near playoff contention, and I fully expect them to be firmly in playoff contention, they're going to go get bullpen pieces, one, maybe two, to make this team as good as they need to be. So we'll keep an eye on that, but we're still, as I knock my microphone completely over, we are still in a situation where we're trying to figure out what the opening day roster is. So we're not quite to the point where we have to worry about the trade deadline yet. So hopefully that answers those Mailbag Monday questions on a Tuesday from our listeners. If you ever have questions for Mailbag Monday, go ahead and follow at LO_Phillies on Twitter, and I'll put out the question from that account every Sunday to get us ready for Monday's episode. Coming up next, we are going to discuss a strong spring. Gotta say that 3 times fast. From Johan Rojas, who has continued to tear the cover off the ball by his standards. I mean, by a lot of player standards. Another bomb this week. And is he winning over the center field job as a starter? I'm not so sure, but it's worth talking about. And it's worth giving him the props for what it seems like he worked on in the offseason. So we will talk about that in just a second as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. But first, let me tell you about our friends over at FanDuel because it's a great time of the year. You know what it is. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. I mean, I got my eye on a couple underdogs this year, a couple teams that I'm looking at. Look at the Big Ten because everyone's focused on the SEC. The Big Ten, they got some good basketball teams. And there's a team right now that's kind of sliding to end their regular season. But come tournament, they could be built to win. That's the Wisconsin Badgers. Take a look at Wisconsin. Also, Tom Izzo at Michigan State. You know that March is always his time. Go ahead and take a look at those teams who are not the number one teams in the tournament, but certainly some blue bloods that you can look at and say, we can see them making it a run. You can get them with spreads. You can get them with game totals, props, everything. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. All right, let's go ahead and discuss this Johan Rojas conversation. This is going to be a fun one because if you've listened to this podcast over the past couple of years, you'll know I'm a big Johan Rojas guy. I played outfield growing up. I ended up pitching because my hands were slow as anything. So once I saw someone throw 80 miles an hour, I couldn't catch up to it. But when I watch baseball, I love great outfield play. I love guys that can just field the heck out of the ball out there on the green grass. And Johan Rojas is the best defensive player at any position for the Philadelphia Phillies, right? He is better than JT Realmuto as a catcher. He is better than Bryce Harper as a first baseman. I know that is saying a lot, and I'm talking in the moment. I'm not talking about over the course of the career. I'm talking in the moment. He is the best defensive player at any position on this team. Firmly believe that. But he's got to hit. And that was the task going into last year's offseason. Hey, is Johan Rojas going to be able to hit in order to play at the major league level? And we had about, 100 at-bats worth of over 300 batting average from his first season. Well, part of the first season he was up because he didn't come up for the full year. Then he added on this muscle. He goes into spring training. Everyone gets excited, and he ends up getting sent down partway through the year because he just wasn't getting the job done. Well, now he goes on another training program. He plays in the Dominican Winter League. People are like, okay, we like what he's working on, but we'll see if it pays dividends. We heard stories last offseason. We're not going to fall for that again. Well, if you want to fall for something, spring training numbers are the perfect thing to fall for because they're very rarely transitioned to the major league season. Now, Bryce Harper is tearing the cover off the ball. Maybe we'll have to talk about that. Does that translate? Is this a big breakout year? Like, we don't know who Bryce Harper is. Is this a big year, though, for Bryce Harper? We'll have that conversation later this week, actually, because I do have a lot of thoughts on that. But Johan Rojas is really handling his average well. He's hit a couple of home runs. He's showing some good ability with the bat. Now, he's not facing top of the top arms. But in the past, Johan Rojas facing middle of the pack arms was struggling mightily. Now, it looks like he might have found something. So what are the chances that Johan Rojas actually has a chance to be the starting center fielder for the Philadelphia Phillies? I would still say it's minimal because the Phillies value the ability to put the ball in play, the ability to get on base, the ability to show a little bit of pop. And you might say, Connor, Rojas has been doing all of that in spring training. I would answer, yeah, I know, but Brandon Marsh does it in the regular season, and he's shown it more consistently. He's not the perfect player, but he has the better track record significantly than Johan Rojas. And I think the Phillies are going to keep the status quo as much as possible rather than just making these rash decisions off of spring training. Now, I did tell you, little credit to me here, that Johan Rojas was a lock to make the team when people were wondering, well, could he be a guy on the outside looking in, depending on what the Phillies want to do for depth in the outfield? And Edmundo Sosa starting to work on the outfield. JT Realmuto was asked about potentially moving to the outfield or at least practicing the position. I don't think Rojas could possibly be left off this team, and he's proven that more and more and more. But will it translate? Well, here's what happens if it does translate. Two things are very, very, well, maybe more than that. Let's go three things. All right, step one, what happens if Rojas truly hits like this during regular season time? The Phillies outfield defense improves significantly because you can play him out there in center. If he's the starting center fielder, wow, you have zero questions about the outfield as far as fielding is concerned up the middle, right? Now, the corners, they're going to have to handle their own, but Rojas makes up for a lot of misplays and stuff that right fielders and left fielders can make. He just covers a lot of ground that guys like Nick Castellanos and Max Kepler are not going to. So that's a great, great thing. That allows you to also have Brandon Marsh as a pinch hitter, a defensive replacement for a guy like Max Kepler. You have a lot of things that you can do, which brings me to my second point when we talk about pinch hitter. If Rojas is a viable bat, well, there's your right-handed hitting outfield depth for when Max Kepler needs a day, Brandon Marsh needs a day. You got this tricky guy on the mound, and you got to say, okay, well, he's a tricky lefty. We want to see a righty. Rojas can get that day. So that's a good thing for him to prove that he can hit. I mean, listen, I bat right-handed. I can't hit a damn baseball at the major league level. So it's not just, well, he's right-handed, so he fits here. You got to be right-handed and productive. And Johan Rojas has been showing that. And the other thing that it opens up, right? This is number three, which may end up being the most important. This whole idea of moving Edmundo Sosa to the outfield potentially came from the idea that you need another right-handed bat that's more productive to back up guys like Brandon Marsh and Max Kepler. Rojas is not really giving the confidence over his first couple seasons at the major league level that you can count on him to be that guy. Could he be? Sure. But that's more of a gamble than a sure thing. If Rojas becomes a guy that you trust and you're like, we're going to give this guy time, we really think he can be our depth piece in the outfield as a right-handed bat, well, then you know what that means? You don't have to worry about bringing in a righty depth piece in the outfield. We talked about how you could change around the number of players in your bullpen to potentially help out the offensive side of the ball for the Philadelphia Phillies. Well, if you don't have to bring in another right-handed outfield bat, maybe you're looking at a situation where it makes it easier for Cody Clemens to make the team. Maybe you're looking at a situation for Gabriel Rincones Jr. to actually make the team as a lefty outfield bat because you say, well, we have Rojas. Maybe we'll bring in Rincones because we don't need to just focus on the righty-lefty stuff anymore. So it opens up a lot of doors if Johan Rojas, not if he's necessarily the starter, right? But if he's a guy that plays up above his watermark when it comes to what you can expect him to do for this year, well, that means the depth has to be less focused on making up for the doomsday scenario that Johan Rojas just absolutely can't hit and you have no outfield depth. So we will see, but credit to Rojas for putting the work in this offseason. If you've followed along with what he's been doing this spring, the way he's been hitting the ball, even a couple home runs, which is not his game, like you should be encouraged by what you're seeing from Johan Rojas. I think the fan base has kind of forgotten about him a little bit. It at least feels like that. Maybe it's because it's the offseason. We're focused on the stars and everything like that. And then spring training, you're focused on the stars getting back, and you're not really like making these grand proclamations about anybody unless you have a podcast, which, hey, I'll be glad to make grand proclamations, be right sometimes, be wrong sometimes. But what this should mean for you, right, if you're watching this is, hey, this kid has put in the work. He looks pretty darn solid compared to last year. Could he be in for a big year? I'm not going to go that far. Could he be in for a serviceable major league backup year? That would be ideal. And it seems like he's heading in the right direction for that. So just wanted to give some praise to Rojas and for anyone who was like watching him do this and being like, make him the starting center fielder. It's not that simple, but you know what? It may end up being a potential move for the Phillies if he does this for another week or so. So that's why it's so tricky to put together the opening day roster projection, because injuries change everything and guys can really show off in the last little bit and change a GM or president of baseball operations mind. So we'll see what Johan Rojas has in store for his time with the Philadelphia Phillies in 2025. That's all for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us once again. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, hitting that subscribe button for the YouTube channel, Locked On Phillies on YouTube. It's free and easy. Get you notifications when new episodes are posted. It really helps me out as well. And I will talk to you tomorrow on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.